Quiet, friends. I have a tale to tell before the tavern closes tonight. I have come a very long way, and seen so many places. I've heard many stories, and I am happy to be here now, to share them with you. So, gather round. If you have lived in Belgravelt for a while, you are aware of the Waywatchers. They are wanderers who ride in the mountains, guiding lost travelers, hunting beasts, protecting the wilds. However, I am sure you know little about them. They are not known to be talkative. Where do they come from? Who are they? What do they spend their days doing when not protecting those who get lost in the woods? Well, I met one, and she told me many things one night beside a roaring fire. I will share her tale with you now. In the capital of our nation, Belgravelt, where free merchants sell their wares to travelers, mercenaries offer their aid to the guards and caravans, and the great Lorelei's bells chime the change of the hour, our hero was born. Her parents named her Sana, after the water flowers that grow in the rivers that run through our mountain passes. They raised her well, the two of them, both tradesfolk, and they wished for her to follow them on the path to such things. Her father made jewelry and tried to teach Sana about the various metals and jewels of his trade. Her mother was a gifted blacksmith, and tried to guide her daughter through the forging of tools and horseshoes. However, none of this interested Sana. Every day, when the woods folk would return with their logs on long sleds, setting their axes aside to go get a drink, she would badger them. She would ask what they would see in the woods, what manner of beast they encountered. They oft brushed her off and ignored the small girl, but this became her dream. Sana started climbing the trees outside the city walls, as well as the various huts and houses around her city. She became quick-footed and sure in her step. This attracted attention, however. The guards certainly didn't care for the young lady's antics. Her neighbors hated how often they would have to repair their walls and roofs, and her parents didn't know what to do with the young scamp. However, one set of eyes watched her practice favorably. One morning, when she was 13, Sana awoke to the guards speaking to her mother and father. The armed men asked the three of them to step just outside the wall to speak to some unknown man. They did as instructed, and before them stood two men, King Becrin III, his messy red hair and his kind eyes locked on the gate. Sana did not recognize the second man. He was small for an Empyrean, maybe only 16 1/4 hands tall. He wore a dull gray cloak and furs. The young girl and her family knelt before the king, causing the shorter man to laugh a bit, prompting a teasing elbow from King Becrin. Sana's mother asked what was going on, and the king sat in the dirt beside his kneeling subjects. He explained that this man was a Waywatcher, and he had noticed Sana's antics. The Waywatcher wondered if the young girl wanted to become his fledgling. Sana did not know what a Waywatcher was, or what a fledgling was for that matter. But the idea seemed to upset her parents. They told the king that they couldn't bear the thought of never seeing her again, and that if the rumors were true, a Waywatcher's life was dangerous out there in the wilds. The king confirmed this with a gentle nod, and told her parents that it is indeed dangerous work. Hunting monsters, aiding travelers, and watching the road for the enemies of the king is, of course, quite dangerous. King Becrin seemed to accept her parents' answer, and just shrugged to his friend the Waywatcher. The man in the cloak looked into Sana's eyes, and gave her a warm smile, before looking off towards the tree line to a unique-looking wide oak. Sana's parents didn't let her out of their sight all day. They said Waywatchers kidnap fledglings often, that they wipe their minds with dark magic so they never return to their real families. Sana just stared at the top of the city wall. It is not that Sana didn't love her parents. They meant the moon and stars to her. However, there was nothing in this city for her. So that night, when they had fallen asleep, Sana left. She scaled the city wall and then climbed down the other side. There, in the tree line, under the wide oak tree, stood the man, the Waywatcher. The Waywatcher introduced himself. His name was Jan Hendrik Erbrook. And that night he would take Sana, and the two would walk through the woods, out of the city, through the rainy night until the following morning. Sana would attempt to ask questions, and Jan would just smile and shake his head, bidding her to be patient. When the sun finally rose over the foggy valley, she could see they had hiked up a nearby mountain and were overlooking the city. Jan told her that he was a Waywatcher, and told her that his title came with certain rules. He was to be brave, facing beasts and bandits. He was to be wild, never again entering a town or city. He was to be a hero, helping those lost and in need. And he was to be alone, accompanied only by a horse, the animals, the trees, a fledgling, and those in need when necessary. He asked if she sought this life. She heartily agreed, before she could even comprehend what he really said. Over the next few years, Jan taught Sana the trade of the Waywatcher, tracking beasts, how to hunt, how to fish, how to camp, basic survival and medicine. Soon enough, he would even teach her the tools of the Waywatcher. Horse riding, the longbow, the short bow, the hand axe, and the longsword. To survive as a Waywatcher, she would learn to master these tools. How to hunt monsters, to find their weaknesses, and how to use the wilderness itself as the perfect cloak. He brought Sana to the Waywatcher's Rest, a quiet home in the mountains that is the only man-made place their kind is allowed to enter. He introduced her to the other Waywatchers, and told her they would be the only people she could ever ask for help. They taught her of the other nations of the world, both friend and foe. They taught her tactics and languages. She was to be as much a spy as she was to be a wild woman. When Sana turned 15, he gave her the last item she would need, her own long gray cloak. And then she took her oath. She is to be brave, facing beasts and bandits. She is to be wild, never again entering a city or town. She is to be a hero, helping those lost and in need. And she is to be alone, accompanied only by a horse, the animals, the trees, a fledgling, and those in need when necessary. With that, Sana was sent out alone. Only her horse, Gansa, would accompany her for many, many seasons. She was told her ward would be the northern roads into Belgravelt, 70 long steps of land to protect all her own. She told me when we spoke that even in those early days she didn't think of going home, only finding her next meal and watching the wilds as though they were her own house. She watched her road for seasons without incident, a troll out of place or a poacher killing rare beasts for their eyes and leaving them to rot, a merchant or two who needed help fixing their wagons on the snow-covered roads during the winters, her constant companion being her horse and the mountain air, the rain and the snow, the animals, the wind. Her hair grew long, and she would spend hours braiding it as she watched the dusty roads. One morning, as she watched the rain clouds roll in across the sky, her eyes spotted something new on the road. A dark horse riding quickly to the north towards the border. Something fell off the back of the horse, and the rider made the creature skid to a violent stop. The rider dismounted. Sana figured it was a slow enough day that she could help a merchant recollect fallen things. So quickly she rode down the mountain to assist. However, as she got closer, she heard two voices. A man with a deep, gruff voice and a northern accent, and the cries of a young Belgrav woman. Sana dismounted Gansa and began to stalk through the brush, her grey cloak helping her vanish into the rain and dull tree trunks. She spotted her quarry carrying a young woman, dressed in noble finery and tied at the wrists. Without thinking, she knocked an arrow onto her longbow string, and loosed it. The thin wooden shaft flew true, and the flint tip tore through the man's leg, forcing him to fall to the ground and drop the woman. He went for a mace on his hip, but even if he drew it, it wasn't a battle he could win. Sana was easily 70 steps away as she drew and loosed another arrow. She approached the man's corpse and began to untie the woman, who immediately wrapped herself around her rescuer, weeping in fear. Sana realized they were the same age. This girl must have only been 17 or 18. Sana patted her on the back and tried to settle her down. The young woman, once settled, revealed herself to be the daughter of King Bekran III, Sophie Bekran. When Sana asked what happened, Sophie told her she had been kidnapped. The man was with the army of the Tivoli Payetdom, and they had planned to use her to force Belgravelt into a surrender. Sana wasn't even aware Belgravelt was at war with the Payetdom, which in truth we were not. But in their lust for land and power, they were hoping to start and win a war all in one day. Sana realized that she needed to return the princess to the capital before the king did anything too rash. So the two mounted Gansa and began the 2-day ride back to Belgrav. It was odd. Normally Sana would find a lost merchant and take them to the nearest town or lead them back towards the road. She hadn't been in someone else's company for more than a few hours in around a year. She found many of her social graces had faded. She oft forgot to laugh at jokes, or how to mind her manners in the presence of nobility. However, Sophie didn't seem to care much. As they rode, Sophie asked a million questions, telling stories of her family, telling jokes. Sana found her intriguing, but kept her behavior intact. A Waywatcher was to be a beast, a shadow, not a blushing courtier. As their first day of travel neared an end, Sana set up her tent for Sophie to sleep in. She left camp to go hunt for something for the two of them to eat. She resigned herself to keep watch all night so the princess could rest. Through all of it, Sophie was right there, helping set the tent, clumsily wandering around the woods while Sana stalked unheard, sitting beside her all night and watching the stars. The next day, the two continued to travel, through the winding mountain passes, along rivers, chatting idly. Sana found a strange comfort in having someone to speak to again. Even someone as chatty as Sophie wasn't entirely without interesting things to say. They talked of the wilderness, of animals, of people and hardship. Sana could feel Sophie's arms wrapped around her waist the entire day, and found peace in the warmth she had brought in the heavy rainstorm of the morning. That night they could see the capital close by, but decided to make camp. The rain had broken, the horse was tired. Sophie wrapped her arms around the Waywatcher and fell asleep with her head on Sana's chest. Sana just watched the stars, doubt in her oath finally creeping in for the first time in years. Why must she be alone? Why can't she enter the cities of the world ever again? She wondered why she couldn't stay by Sophie's side forever. The next morning, the two rode in silence down to Belgrave. Sophie dismounted Santa's horse right outside the city gates, and the two shared a knowing smile. Santa rode back to her ward, the 70 long steps of mountain and forest, alone. Tears rolled down Santa's cheeks, masked by the rain that danced down her face, as she rode in contemplative silence. She arrived home the next day, and reached her favorite perch on the side of a tall mountain. She watched the distance with pain in her heart, and a loneliness that she couldn't seem to shake. As she watched the horizon, she saw something that made her stomach tighten. A platoon's worth of soldiers making their way down the northern road. Perhaps they figured the 50 men could take Belgravelt by themselves. Maybe they were scouts. It didn't matter to Santa. Santa strung both of her bows and rode quickly down the mountain. When she reached the dirt path, she dismounted her horse and sent him away. If she survived, she was certain she could find him in the woods. She jammed 12 of her arrows into the dirt in front of her in the middle of the road, and kept another 12 tucked into her sheath, before vanishing into the tree line. The soldiers were a long step away, and she took that to her advantage, rushing through the trees to find a good position from which to flank them. Once she could see the soldiers, she put her longbow to work, drawing and loosing arrows, crippling 12 of the men, if not outright putting them down. Her accuracy proving to be legendary. One after another falling. The rest broke into a run, not able to see their assailant in the tree line, her gray cloak protecting her from all eyes. As they ran away, she ran faster, keeping pace before making it in front of the last 38 of them. She walked to the 12 arrows she stuck in the ground and switched to her short bow. The more flexible arms and lighter string allowed her to tear an arrow from the dirt, knock, draw, and shoot far quicker. Now, with their eyes upon her, they made themselves easier to shoot. As they ran downhill towards her, swords drawn, she put down another 12 with her short bow. She was out of arrows, and no soldier alive could fight 26 people alone and survive. So she ran into the woods again, letting the enemy see her flee. They followed her into the forest, the pines keeping her obscured and the rain hiding any sounds she made. She set her bows aside and began to climb the trees around her. She had mastered climbing. Rain or snow, tree or mountain, she could scale anything. Once she was high enough, she watched the soldiers run blindly into the terrain that they could not navigate. Santa, however, could navigate this forest. She climbed down and began to follow the men who broke off from their friends, her hand axe making easy work of them from behind once she was certain no one was looking at her target. She could traverse the trees, hide in plain sight, vanish into the bushes and rain. She was an animal, and these men wandered into her forest with intent to hurt her, with intent to hurt her princess. Soon enough, only one remained, and she put away her axe. She drew her longsword, feeling the familiar weight in her 2 hands as she began to rush from the trees towards him. He attempted a swing once he saw her, but she easily lifted her sword to catch his blade against the crossguard. In one easy flick, she ripped his sword from his hands and threw it aside, grabbing his tabard and forcing him into a nearby tree. She stared into his eyes and saw that he was terrified of her. She took a deep breath. She sheathed her sword. Sanna tied the man's wrists together, threw him onto the back of her horse, and rode for the capital once again. When she arrived, she handed the enemy soldier over to the guards, her eyes lingering on the castle. She could ask to see Sophie, or her mom and dad if they're still alive. Yet she didn't do either. She rode back up the mountain path to return to her forest. However, at the top of a hill, under a familiar-looking wide oak tree, was Sophie. The two shared a passionate kiss and spoke for a moment. Sophie begged Sanna to break her oath, to come stay with her, and one day be married to a queen. Sanna just shook her head. No matter how many Waywatchers there are, if she left her post, there would be one less sword defending Sophie. Her heart would yearn for her, but she could never truly return to a city. When I met Sanna, I was climbing a cliff by a waterfall. I had slipped, and she caught me as I fell. We shared a fire, and she told me this tale. I asked why she would subject herself to this life of loneliness, and she just shook her head. She had no answer to that question. She would give anything to be with our current queen, but the wilds are her home. She sees herself as a beast who protects the people of this great land. Once a year, she will go stand at the old oak tree and see her love again, but the two are doomed to never truly be together. Duty matters more to them both than their own happiness. Sanna taught me this song, and I wish to play it for you now.
לב שבשון יש, אבסתה תחומסה, לב שבכביץ' יש, דשתה פריסה, חומקת, וצפת ויש, Verlaat is najesh, Chomakat, Veth wilde hatis jen, Nehikt dikt najen, Vezulgekt jen gwas, Silna Betein grüßt, Chomakat, Veelweilig weithlo, weithlo, Veth wilde gatis jen, Veth zwart is jen, Chomakat.
I thank you all for being here tonight. I bid you ask yourself this question. Is it better to love someone you cannot touch, but follow your heart? Or is it better to abandon all you know to be with the one you love? Next we meet, I want to speak to you of a bard like myself, who has magical power that I have never seen paralleled in all my travels. I will tell you of the dwarven cities below the mountains, and how this mage's music is used to keep that city running. Until then, I have a tome of tales from every nation to share with you all. I have seen many monsters, many heroes. I have learned of the magic offered by the gods, and the magic humans can conjure for themselves. I have seen warfare, and I have tales of peace. I cannot wait to tell them all to you. Good night, and thank you. Legends of Lorelei is an immersive, fantasy fiction audio drama produced by Livewire Stories. This show is written and produced by Gwen Fullman. The music you heard in this episode was composed and performed by Gwen Fullman. The narrator for this episode was played by Gwen Fullman. If you enjoy this show and want to hear more, please consider subscribing to our Patreon at Livewire Multimedia Stories to receive episodes a week early for only $2 a month. Check out our website at livewiretabletop.wixsite.com/livewire. Subscribe to us on YouTube or join our Discord server in the description below. The best way you can support this is to show it to a friend. Thank you.